ask you to hear from another committed socialist and trade unionist who is fighting the Tory MP for Kemp Town, Simon Kirby. Nancy Platts is Labour's parliamentary candidate for Brighton, Kemp Town and Peacehaven, and will be the next MP. Will be my next MP, I'm very pleased to say. So, Nancy, over to you.
Thanks very much for inviting me along today. It's always a pleasure to speak at an LRC event. And I've been asked to speak about austerity, and the theme that I really want to talk about is putting people first. The economic policies of this coalition have failed, that's clear, and after 3.5 years of David Cameron and George Osborne, working people are worse off, and there's still no recovery for millions of people. And despite the new forecast of the last budget, the government has failed to deliver what it promised in 2010 on living standards, growth and a deficit. Wages are down around £1,600 a year since David Cameron became Prime Minister, and the Office for Budget Responsibility confirmed that people will be worse off in 2015 than they were in 2010. IFS figures have shown that families will be £974 a year worse off by the next election as a result of tax and benefit changes. Energy bills are up about £300. And George Osborne has overseen the slowest recovery for 100 years and is forecast to borrow over £190 billion more than planned. We've had a double-dip recession, and we've had tens of billions of pounds more debt to pay off as a result of the unprecedented cuts that choked off the emerging recovery from the last Labour government. And we've seen successive cuts in corporation tax for big firms, but that's been wasted as the largest UK corporations sit on hundreds of billions of pounds themselves. And David Cameron and George Osborne can't deliver a recovery for the many because they stand up for the privileged few. They've cut the top tax rate of people owning over £150,000 whilst everyone else is worse off. And bank bonuses are rising again, even though businesses still can't get the finances that they need. And on top of that, we've got increasing underemployment, part-time workers that want full-time work, zero-hours contracts and casualisation. So a Labour government, a future Labour government, would have to deal with far more than we originally might have hoped for. But despite this, as Labour, we have to convince voters that we can make a difference. And I think we've had some good policy initiatives. Increasing the minimum wage in line with earnings, putting some control on rents and abolishing letting agents' fees, freezing energy prices, increasing tax for the highest 1% of earners, cutting down for tax relief on pensions for higher earners and the mansion tax. But I think that what's missing is painting a picture of what life would really be like for people under a future Labour government. I think that people need to be offered a vision and hope for the future. I mean, the economy is crucial if we want to win power, but I think we need to be making some statements on at least 2 or 3 key policy areas which would appeal to the vast majority of the population. And I wanted to talk a minute about housing as part of that recovery. And earlier on I mentioned corporation tax. The cuts to corporation tax have failed on money that should have been used for medium and long-term investment in order to create sustainable employment for the future. So a Labour government, for example, could increase capital gains tax and then reinvest the money into renewable industries, carbon-friendly housing and jobs in construction, including apprenticeships. This government have instead fuelled property prices in a totally destructive way that's in danger of laying the foundations for yet another financial crisis based on inflated property values. I think it's a total disgrace to guarantee taxpayers' money for loans to people buying properties up to £600,000. Instead, what we should be doing is freeing up local government to build council and other affordable housing, as well as utilising the many empty properties that still exist. And I don't think we can rely on the private sector to do that for us. In 2012, the 10 biggest housing developers made combined profits of £1.1 billion. If it's in their interests to sit on land instead of developing it, that's what they're going to do. And I think we've got to clamp down on tax avoidance. You know, constantly I'm asked the question that if we want to fund the kind of things I want to fund in, say, public services, a decent railway, NHS, education and so on, how are we going to raise the money? And I think we've got to start being a bit more open about that. The HMRC at the moment estimates that £35 billion a year is still lost to the Exchequer through tax evasion for wealthy individuals and the non-payment of taxes. So I think the money's there if we're going to work to get it. And health, not the economy, is some of the things that we should be talking about in terms of framing a Labour appeal to voters. I think we need to let people know in no uncertain terms that the Health and Social Care Act would be repealed by Labour. We've said that's what we're going to do, but I think we've got to keep repeating it, because that act was designed to open up full-scale privatisation of the NHS, and we've seen that happening at our local hospital. Everyone that we speak to values the NHS, but voters trust Labour more to look after it, more than any other party. Remember last time around, we brought down waiting lists from 18 months to 4 months due to massive investment and spending. I don't buy the argument that we can't do that again. I think we can if we collect things like those unavoided taxes. We could also start talking about a tax increase, say 1% on income tax, to pay for the increasing challenge of providing care for an ageing population. A Labour government can protect frontline services by making savings through effective integration of health and social care. And I think it's time that we were clearer about ensuring support for older people in their homes, in an area that's been cut over the last few years. And I want to see investment in skills for the future. As I said, increasing housing supply through building council homes, clamping down on tax avoidance, but not forgetting the importance of Labour continually talking about the protection of our public services, with NHS being at the heart of that. Now, of course, we've got to bring the deficit down and balance the books, but I want to see an election campaign that puts people first and is not purely focused on money and the deficit. And as many of you know, we in the Labour movement have been at the sharp end of campaigning over the last few weeks on just such a campaign. So the Labour Party and the SBU have been working incredibly hard to save our fire service. The SBU have been down at the pier every weekend. I'm sure some of you have seen the fire engine down there with Wellington and someone on the top. I was actually lucky enough to ride on top of that fire engine with Wellington just the other day. Yeah, they did give us, as a little aside, they did give us a health and safety warning, because you know how keen everyone is on health and safety. And we were on the top of a fire engine with just a handrail, and he does actually go quite fast, and it was quite wobbly. And the firefighter said, right, as we set off, we're just going to give you a quick health and safety talk. So the four of us were standing up there thinking that we were going to be told this is really serious stuff. And he said, right, when we shout duck, duck. And I have to say, you know, there's some quite low overhanging trees around Brighton, and we nearly got caught out a couple of times after we were on top of there. But, you know, it's been a very serious campaign. I'm pleased that we're finally getting cross-party support for it, that the Labour Party has been leading on this since we found out about these proposals back in February. We are the political party that said, actually, we're not going to put up with this, we're going to go out there and do something about it. I think now that it's been seen to be very popular amongst voters, we've got all the other political parties coming on board as well. Now, I welcome that if it means that we can save our fire service, because it's very close to my heart as someone who worked in the fire brigade for 11 years. I don't want us to see one of our fire engines being cut. We've only got 5 fire engines, and that covers the area from Hove right down to Saltdean. Now, if one of those fire engines is cut, we're left with 4. And you need 4 fire engines to go to any incident in a high-rise building. And a high-rise building is anything above 4 floors. So as soon as we have one fire, say up in the Whitehawk estate or somewhere else, there is no other fire cover. It could come in from elsewhere, but they're cutting their services too. So I don't think that's something that we should be relying on. And one of the reasons we went up to Whitehawk on Thursday is because that is one of the most disadvantaged areas in Brighton. As you know, we've got something like nearly 50% child poverty up in that area. And I fear that once again, it is the most vulnerable and disadvantaged people in our communities that some political parties are saying it is okay to put at risk because we're not going to properly fund your public service. And like I said earlier, I don't buy that argument. There is not enough money around. It is a statutory responsibility to provide a fire service in the community. We pay our taxes, and it's up to us to decide how those taxes are spent. And I want mine to be spent on a decent fire service. So the decision's going to be made next week, and I think what's gone on over the last few weeks and the way we've been able to raise the profile of that campaign has actually driven home to a lot of people the real meaning of austerity, actually how it is going to hit us on the ground with our emergency services. And it concerns me that these decisions are being budget driven instead of being driven by the needs of people. And in this case, it's their right to be kept safe. Now you will have seen, you will have been handed hopefully one of these. We've got another few days to get these cards out and raise awareness because that decision is made next Thursday. There's a load over there. I would really, really appreciate it if you could take even a small bundle for family and friends, but if you can take enough to deliver your whole street and get those out over the weekend, that would help us to raise awareness even further. We've had 30,000 of these going out across the 3 constituencies of Brighton and Hove to raise awareness. But if we don't make a noise about it, we'll lose 24 firefighters and a fire engine. So it's up to us to make sure that people know. So if you can take a few, that would help us out and it would save me and Steve taking them home again, which is always good. You know, so the point I want to finish on really is that it is us the people who pay taxes for this government to distribute, and I think it's time that we would put first. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Nancy. And